All right, welcome back, everyone, to Navigating Life After 40. I am your host, Roni Jai, and today I am here with a guest, Candice Denise. Welcome, Candice. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Ronnie?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you for being here as we get ready to talk about this important topic for women in midlife, and that is mindful aging. We got to talk about it. We got to
Got
talk about it.
you.
But before we jump in and kick things off, I have a bit of an icebreaker for you. Okay.
Okay.
What is one maybe hilarious or memorable moment that you have about your own experience as you have aged? Or I'm not going to say age because that makes us sound old, but as you have matured.
Matured. Gosh, do we have enough time? No, I just memorable. Lord have mercy. So I would probably say, I think something that's been more recently memorable. A friend and I were laughing about this. We were out at dinner a few months, maybe end of last year, and the menus come along or whatever have you, and we both like kind of took our glasses off to look at the menu, and we looked at each other and we're like, we're there, like we're there, right? And it was just this hilarious moment, but we understood that it was like, girl,
Yeah.
our eyes are, because she wears eyeglasses too, we're like,
Hmm.
girl, our eyes aren't officially changing, like,
Yeah.
and so it was just memorable, also telling that
Yeah.
things are changing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's nice to know that you're not by yourself, right? There's somebody else
Hmm.
who's navigating it, and to have it in that very moment to be like, "You too? Oh, okay."
Yes.
So, that was definitely probably one of those, more memorable and just kind of significant moments to show that I am maturing, and so are my
Yes.
eyes.
Yes, yes, and so are the eyes. I totally get it. I am there sometimes. I have, like, so many pairs of glasses.
Okay.
There are a couple. I went to the eye doctor, my last appointment, and she was like, "I think we need to start adding the one little lens at
Oh,
the
the
bottom," and I was
bifocal.
like, I'm not that old, am I?" And she was like, "It's time." And I was like, "Oh god." So I was like, "Okay, I'm not gonna add this to all my glasses. I will only do it to one." But I do
Mm,
notice that I have to pull back that paper sometimes so that I
what
can
is
see things.
Yes.
So
And it's
yeah,
funny, we used to laugh at people or we look around like, look at how they're looking at the menu. Now it's like, oh, we are those people. So
exactly. Are those people. We are those people. All right. So as we move into this conversation about mindful aging, we know that this is one of those areas that I know women we struggle with because there are these
mhm.
societal pressures and all of these physical changes happening in our body. And for a lot of us women, it can be difficult to accept that these
Yeah.
things are taking place. We're trying to, like, should we live up to these expectations that society
Mm,
has of us? Also trying to find a way to get our own identity in this, I want to say space, but in this journey, finding our
yeah.
own identity. And then also, of course, we know dealing with the physical changes as we, just talked about a little bit. So we'll spend some time today talking, a little bit about this, how to celebrate those, the wisdom at this time, and go comparison and also
Mm.
self-care among just a few other things as we kick this off.
All right.
All right. So we know, of course, with age comes wisdom and experience. So they say.
Right. So they say, whoever
So
they
they
are,
say.
so they say.
Whoever they are. As you have been navigating this time and possibly even learning from other women in midlife, how can women learn to reframe the narrative around aging to celebrate, the knowledge and insights that they've gained over the years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things that you just said about even for myself, the women that I've gained knowledge from. And I think that
Mhm.
knowledge is power. We say that in general, right? And so one of the ways that we can change the narrative, or women who are listening can change the narrative, is become more knowledgeable about this thing called aging.
Yeah.
Oftentimes what we've heard about aging has been passed down to us through someone else, or what we've seen, quote unquote, society say about it and tell us, right? The narratives that we've been told. And so
Mhm.
empowering yourself to become more knowledgeable and looking and going out there and reading articles and really learning about like what's actually happening at different stages of my life. It's like when a woman is carrying a baby, they go to the doctor and they go look, or they get reports on what's happening with the baby at this stage, what's happening with the baby at that stage. Learn about what's happening with the different stages. So, when I'm between this age group, what are the things that I can expect? What does aging look like? What has been reported? I feel like the more that you empower yourself, the narrative starts to change, because now it's not third party information. Now it's not
Mm.
through someone else's perspective, through someone else's lens. It's through your own. It's through what you've gained and what you understand. And so now that allows you to kind of create what aging looks like for you based on information, right? Based on
Yeah.
this knowledge that you've obtained.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's often a miss sometimes from women in midlife. I've heard so many women talk about, well, I've learned these things by maybe watching their mom or their grandmothers or aunts and things and how they went through life, but they also still hold on to the fact, and I bring it up sometimes myself, which
Hmm.
is we did not always have those conversations about what it's like to get older. This is what to expect. We probably
Hmm.
just saw, our moms and our grandmothers probably just going through. They probably had a fan or,
Yeah.
but they didn't talk about it. They didn't
Right.
talk about it with us. But I love the idea of, really learning to read. I know that's something that I have done more of, reading and using that information to really empower yourself so that you can, just have the wisdom you need to go through this time, because it's rewarding and it's fulfilling, but it's also
Yeah.
some tough moments. It's also some tough moments, and just having the right information is going to be necessary as we continue this journey, because listen, the hot flashes and everything else, they might start now, but they don't always end as you get older. So how do I
Yeah.
learn these things now and
Hmm.
continue to, incorporate those as I age and
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
I mature? I
As
don't
a
want to
ma-
stop saying age,
I
as I
love it.
mature.
But I mean, and I think that even in that, right, Ronnie, like changing the fear of saying age. Like there's
Yeah.
so much we children age, right? Like
Mhm.
you're turning, another year older. And so it's like, but why is it's like when we get to a certain point, the word age is now like taboo. Like don't say age. But it
Yeah.
was like when we were younger, you could be like, you could say age or teenager, I mean,
Mhm.
whatever have you. But it's like we should be okay with saying it now. And I think that's also part of the debunking the myths. And
Yeah.
I think that's also part of the unlearning and relearning or learning something new, based on, again, what was passed down to us. And so we might have seen women that were older say, I don't tell my age. I don't want, like, no, don't ask. I've been 22 for 5 years or 3 years, like however people do it or whatever. It's like, and I'm not knocking it. I don't
Yeah.
ever want anybody to feel like there's a judgment. But it's acceptable if you are okay with being like, I want to embrace my age. I want to share
Yeah.
it. I don't want to feel like because I said age that, gosh, it's like this is literally a natural part of life. It's like a woman having her cycle,
Mhm.
and we don't want to say, don't say cycle. It's like these are parts of life.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's why educating ourselves is so important, so that we're comfortable. And even if you still aren't comfortable, at least you are knowledgeable.
Yeah, I like that. I had to raise my hand as you were talking, because I'm one of those people who still tell my nieces and nephews, like, I'm 29. And so one of
Oh,
my
okay.
nieces, she's like, Auntie Rennie, I will be 29 next year. So something is off with the numbers.
The math ain't mathing. Be
It's
like,
not bad. So I
well,
do, yeah, right. So I'm just like, don't worry about it. You just know 29 and just stick to that.
and
So
there's
I'll
nothing
move
wrong
it
with
up.
that. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with if you want to be 29 and fine for the rest of your life. Oh, with your bad self. Okay, right.
I love it, but yeah, thank you too for pointing that out because I know I've always said age, but for some reason today I just feel like saying mature, like age is but I'm gonna remember that, we're aging and it's okay to say the word. It's okay to accept that. Um, because we're gonna do it mindfully and with grace.
And it's not gonna stop, and we
Yeah,
don't stop it, you know what I mean? Like, we're not able to, stop it as much as we'd like to think we can.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and that's just my journey, I think I've just had to become even more comfortable, and that's part of my own mission is helping in my own small way to join conversations like you on amazing platforms like you have here, and having these conversations because to your point earlier, we didn't have those conversations,
mhm,
a lot of women were not given these conversations, and so the generations that are coming after us are in a greater position because they now have podcast and
yeah,
YouTube and social media platforms like, IG and
yeah,
TikTok that people are talking about this, right? There's this
right,
whole community now that's talking about aging. So it's awesome. And it's like, wow, we kind of get to create, Ronnie, you're part of like the new narrative that's being built. Your podcast is literally helping to rewrite history in many ways.
yeah, I love that, and I appreciate that because some days it can be tough, and you're like, "Am I doing it?" I'll be like, "God, am I doing the
Mhm.
right thing?" But I
Mhm.
always have to remember this is bigger than me.
Yeah.
And it's not only here to help myself, but also so many women. Again, we did not have these conversations. My mother didn't have it with me. And so now
Yeah.
we are in these spaces where these conversations are taking place, and you have more people speaking out about it. There are even some, now I'm seeing more doctors that are actually getting the education they need to
Yes.
help women navigate midlife as well. So, and that's just been a pleasure to see. Just
Mhm.
a number of doctors who have really taken the time to say, you know what, we can't just throw a pill at this and this is it. I have to
Right.
really understand what's happening as,
Yes.
the mind changes, the body changes. So, yeah, thank you for sharing it because you are right. Things are different, things have changed, and this is now this new journey that I am hoping will help so many women um, as they enter, excuse me, into their 40s and also beyond that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you for that.
No, you're welcome.
Um, let's talk about comparison. Let's talk a
Ooh,
little bit about comparison. We
let's
know
do it.
that, women, they are, and this can be at any age, but I know as we get older, there's a lot of comparison. A lot of women, they are comparing themselves either to who they used to be
Mm.
or to someone else.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, how can women begin the process of really letting go of these comparisons so that they can find their unique journey in their own individual beauty?
Yeah. You know, I just spoke on this maybe 2 nights ago. I was part of a master class and we were talking about mindset and comparison. And I often say that when you stare, you start to compare.
Yeah,
When you stare at
I
something
love
for
that.
far too long, you start to compare. I don't think there's
Right.
anything wrong with glancing, right? Taking a look
Mhm.
over here, taking a look back at where you were, your quote unquote old self, or
Yeah,
that version of yourself,
yeah.
and gaining some pointers from it. I don't think anything is wrong with looking at someone else, glancing, right? But when you stare, when you fixate on it, that is when you start to do this comparison analysis. This is when you start to do the
Mhm.
inner criticism, when you start pulling yourself apart, when you start doing all of the judgment. And the one thing that you can do about helping yourself with comparison is understand first thing is um, you are growing into a version of yourself that you've never been before. And that's not my quote. That's something I saw on social media somewhere and I just loved it. And I've
Mhm.
started to incorporate it even in my own language. We're all growing into versions of ourselves that we've never been before. And so,
Yeah,
how fair is it to truly compare that version of you prior to this version that you're growing into because you don't know this version. This is
yeah.
something new. And so I think the first thing is giving yourself this level of grace, which is ultimately self-compassion, meaning
Mhm.
be kinder to yourself, speak kind to yourself, be more loving and understanding with yourself, understanding I don't know this version of me, you know, and I got to give myself time to learn that version. And so if that version of me has gained a little bit more weight or has lost some weight, or that version of me is more, this version of me is more tired than the old version, that's okay. I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier today, and we were talking about a few years ago, we were doing these 4 a.m. wake ups, and that's when we were
Mhm.
working out at 4 a.m. We were in our 4 a.m. zone. And we were like, now, it's more around between the 5 and 6 that we get up. And we were like, but it's still okay. We don't need to compare that part of us to this because we're in a different season of life too.
Right.
So I think the other, to answer your question, is being able to help yourself with not comparing, whether it's to someone or someone else, is giving yourself compassion and
Yeah.
understanding that this version of you is new and that
Yes.
and that you don't know it. Right. The second thing is you're in a different season of life.
Mhm.
Right. So what you did then is different now. That person is in a different season than you are. So you may be watching them, but you're not them and they're not you.
Yeah.
And we all are individual and we all carry our own light. And so I think instead of focusing on the comparison, it's really more about what is my light now? What does my light now look like? You know, it may be different, but it's still there. And how can I contribute to the greater good of my own life, the greater good of this world? I think those two things, if not to give people a whole lot, but just compassion, understanding with yourself, and also recognizing that seasons change and that you're in a different season and that's okay.
Yes, I love that. You dropped so many gems. I was just like taking notes in my mind. If you stare, you compare. That is like, listen, I need to make sure that I highlight that one for this episode. If you stare, you compare. That is
That's right.
so good to remember. And it's also a great reminder. It's definitely a great reminder for us.
Mhm.
That was good.
Yeah. It's what, yeah, no, listen, when I first like said it myself, like it was so
Yeah.
crazy. Now that
Yeah.
is an original of my own that I said. And when it was dropped into my spirit a few years back, I was just like,
Mhm.
and it really came from a car analogy. I was driving, and when we're in our cars, you drive forward
Yeah.
and your focus is on your lane, right? You don't want to go into someone else's lane because you crash or get into an accident. So you're driving in your lane and you're focused forward. You don't
Mhm.
drive with your hand on the wheel and looking to the right or to the left or in your mirrors the entire time. You
Mhm.
glance in your mirrors, but your
Yeah.
focus is forward. Because if you start to stare too long at the car to the left or the car to the right or the ones behind you, you're going to crash. And that's what happens when we stare, we crash,
Yes.
right? We have these internalized crashes, which becomes the inner critic, the low self esteem, the lack of confidence, self sabotage, imposter syndrome, self doubt. All of
Yes.
those things are what we call the crash, or what I call the crash, rather. But when you're driving, you glance. So you check your mirrors, you check the sides to make sure that you are not in anyone else's lane, they're not in yours, to kind of see what they're doing so that it helps you focus on what you need to do, right? So
Yes.
if you see someone over there wobbling, okay, you're like, let me pay attention to that. Let me make sure that I'm doing what I need to do. And I think that's why it's okay to look at the older version of you, to glance at the other person so that you can learn from them. Right.
Mhm.
That's how we actually grow. And I just said this yesterday in a post. I don't believe that wisdom comes with age. I think that wisdom comes with willingness, a
Yes.
willingness to be open, to be understanding to new perspectives, a willingness to grow from your experiences, a willingness to learn from your successes and your failures. And so when we are willing to just glance versus stare, I think that is completely okay. It's the staring that causes crashes. The
Yeah.
glances cause, wisdom. They cause growth. They cause us to be more understanding. But that staring is where it becomes problematic.
Yes. I love that. I love the analogy of the car. I was just picturing that as you were describing it because you're right. If we look too much to the left or the right, or even in the rearview mirror, we're going to crash because we're not staying focused. And that focus should be on us. And it kind of brings me back to stay in your lane a little bit.
That's it.
Stay in your lane a
Absolutely.
little bit. And you said so many other great things as well in about your light and really your light, and then also learning this new version of who you are.
Yeah.
Um, there's just so many gems dropped in that. Like I could literally spend time there, but I know like just for the sake of time, I
That's all
know we got to
right.
keep going, but I could definitely just spend so much time with this particular your answer to that particular question because it was so profound and it actually helped me because I was like,
Mm.
man, you are right. You are right. We can't look to the left or the right too long. We need to stay focused
You
and
look
stay straight
long.
ahead.
If you look long, you look wrong.
Look
Okay?
wrong.
You're
Yep,
looking
that's
wrong. You look long, you're looking wrong. All right?
what the
If
old
you
folks
stare,
say.
you
Yeah.
prepare. All right?
You
So
stare, you compare.
stay focused. Keep your eyes on the prize. I mean, all of the little sayings, but
Yeah, I
and I
love
love
it.
I love good wordplay because I just think it makes things easier to just kind of hold on to. And
Mhm,
yeah, when it comes to your light, just asking yourself like, what does my light look like in this season? Because sometimes I
mhm.
think we don't give ourselves the grace to grow.
Yeah.
And that comes with aging, growing, this grace of growing, not just numerically, physically, mentally,
Mhm,
emotionally,
emotionally, yeah.
spiritually, financially, socially, like all the areas of wellness. And so that's why I feel like, sometimes we're wondering why things don't feel necessarily aligned. It's like because maybe we're trying to force something that was meant to be done with that version of you. And you're aging, you're growing, you're evolving into this next version. And it's okay if the light about you changes a bit in a different direction, right? You're shining your light on something different
Yeah.
versus where it was before.
Yeah. And you made me think about something that I always tell people is that you should always be growing and trying to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
Um, and as someone who is in, my mid 40s, if I was the same person I was at 20, for me, that's a problem. When I
Mm.
think about that, I should always be growing and evolving. As you mentioned, in those lessons, those and what we like to call those grows and those pros. And so
Oh,
what are
yes.
those wins and what are those grow areas, those things that you have to learn from and using that as wisdom and as fuel for the next part of your journey. Because
Mm.
that is another myth that's out there. With age comes wisdom, and I
Yes.
think that that's something that we really have to work on, like, changing the narrative around because there are a lot of people, and I'm sure, some, and I know I do, who are older. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of wisdom
Yeah,
there.
may not be as wise, and
Yeah.
that's not a knock against them. That's just
Yeah.
a reality.
It's just the reality. Right. Right. And you made a couple points, which leads me into this next piece about
Sure.
self-care. One of the things I always touch on with self-care is I touch on every aspect, and you mentioned all of them, which is the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and the financial. A lot of people don't even
Mhm.
look at financial as a form of self-care, but I always tell them that is part of self-care. So as we age, of course, what are some mindful self-care practices that women can begin to prioritize to nurture these areas a little bit more that will kind of further help them grow?
Yeah. Well, I guess we can start with talking about finances because, it definitely is a part of your self-care, part of your wellness and your well-being because
Mhm.
when your money's funny, you feel off. When your
Mhm.
money is funny, you mentally feel off. You feel emotionally off, stressed, overwhelmed, anxious. Like there's so many different emotions that can be rooted in your money not being well. And so, in that case, really trying to nurture your relationship with your money, whether that is not just about gaining more money, but this is something in my own life that I had to assess. What is your relationship with money? How
Yeah.
do you feel about it?
Yeah.
What were the narratives that you grew up listening to? And I honestly attribute that to a book that I read by Jen Sincero.
Mhm.
one of my favorite authors, and the book is called You Are a Badass at Making Money.
I
And
have that book actually,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, it is like a gold. And I listen to
Is
it
it?
quite often because I'm an audible book kind of person. But
Mhm.
one of the things she had the reader do is write a letter to money. And
Yeah.
so when we talk about self-care, I think this is something that I'm sharing with the audience here is you can nurture your financial relationship. You feel like you're always in a place where you're in a deficit or money doesn't seem to be working out for you, or
Mhm.
you always feel like you're in lack and never abundance or prosperity. In order
Mhm.
to nurture that well-being, maybe start by writing a letter to money. And how does it make you feel? Right? Treat money as if it was someone that you were sitting across the table from and talking to,
Yeah.
and allow yourself to just write, because in that letter you're probably going to see the areas where maybe there's some work that's necessary. Maybe you don't have a trust with money, maybe
Yeah.
something in your life caused you not to be able to trust money, and so maybe that means that do you need to go to a money coach, a money
Mhm.
therapist? These are financial therapists, these are real people out here who help in these
Mhm.
areas. So that's a self-care assessment that I would say there. When it comes to your physical, small steps still equal forward progress. And
Yeah.
so doing things that are like we're doing here, making sure you have your water with you when you know you're going to be in positions where you have to do a lot of talking so that you're
Yeah.
staying hydrated. That's something very small. It doesn't require you to have to find more time, because a lot of times when it comes to self-care, I hear people say, I don't have enough time. And
Mhm.
self-care doesn't require more time. It requires you to be more mindful about how you are taking care of you, right? I like to define self-care as it's the small decisions that you make that help you take
Mhm.
better care of you. And
Yeah.
so just doing small things like making sure you have, snacks with you, or lunch. If you know you're going to have a long day, you're not going to really be able to stop and have the lunch. Make sure you pack some kind of at least snacks that can fuel you, not just something that's going to, give your body junk. So thinking about that, when you get out of the bed, do a few stretches. When you're brushing your teeth, do some squats
Mhm.
or stretching right there. These small little things help you take care of yourself physically. Emotionally, I think checking in with yourself is a self-care practice you can do. What do I mean by that? By asking yourself, how am I doing today?
Yeah.
Where is my heart today? How am I actually feeling? And allow
Mhm.
yourself to have those feelings, right? Don't push yourself, pace yourself. So you don't have to say, I'm not really feeling it today. And that's
Yeah.
okay. I don't have tons to give, but I'll give some of what I have, not all of what I have.
Mhm.
I need to hold on to something for me today because I'm not feeling my best self. And I
Mhm.
think as far as your spiritual wellness, one of those things is really just taking out time to either meditate or to pray, or to, if you are into scriptures and things of that sort, reading your Bible, having devotional time, having time where you sit with the Creator and just really allow yourself to express how you're feeling, and then giving time to be able to receive maybe messaging back, downloads that may come
Yeah.
back to you from the Creator. Because sometimes we're so quick to just share and give and talk that we don't give ourselves enough time to sit and listen and be deposited into.
Yes, yes, you said a word, you said a word. I remember learning that years ago at church because we can pray and we can talk to God or whoever our higher power is,
Mhm.
and then we get up and we quickly just go.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good to just pause, take a
Yeah.
moment and see what comes back to you.
Yeah.
If he's speaking to you or whoever your higher power is, are they speaking to you? Do they have something for you for that day?
Mhm.
Even when you're reading, I've noticed that as well. That is my time. I try to make sure that, okay, this is my time at the start of my
Yeah.
day, which is prayer and studying my Bible.
Mm.
And I use that as a way for God to guide me. And I also ask him, what do you have for me today?
Yeah.
What do you
Yeah.
have for me? And I make sure that I'm in tune so that I can hear that.
Yep.
Because when everything else is going on, like I can't hear. And when I'm in a rush, I can't hear. So yes, I love that you mentioned that. And I also love those other parts of self-care that you also touched on because this is something that has been repeated often as I'm doing
Mhm.
my episodes, even with guests. It's take just a couple seconds to just do some deep breathing. You can be washing dishes, as one of my previous guests said, and you can just take a deep breath. You can just close your eyes for a minute and just
Yes.
practice some meditation or some mindfulness practice just for a few seconds. It doesn't have to be this, well, I gotta go to the gym, because I think that's what everybody thinks about when they hear self-care is the gym.
Right.
And it's not necessarily going to the gym. So the gym is great. It helps, especially
Yeah.
as we are in this phase of life. We definitely have to care for our physical bodies a lot differently now.
Absolutely.
However, that's just not what it is when we talk about self-care. It's this all encompassing
Mhm.
um, thing that we have to do.
Mhm.
And I appreciate you sharing that and just kind of reiterating things that I've also shared on previous episodes and also have had guests share as well. So it's like, you guys keep hearing it, the same thing. It's like everybody's preaching the same thing when it
Yeah.
comes to self-care. And you're right, just those small steps. It's
Yes.
just something small every day that you can deposit into your bank that's going to just, to me, give you a return on,
Mm.
I'm gonna say, your investment in yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. All right, let's chat about this one for a little bit
Okay.
and finding joy in everyday moments. Now that is a challenge. You did hit on something where you mentioned checking in with yourself,
Mhm.
which I love. We have to do that.
Mhm.
Um, but there are some women who, even when they do those self check-ins, they still struggle a bit.
Yeah.
Um, and they can't always find joy,
Mhm.
even in the smallest things.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, how can women cultivate more of this sense of mindfulness and cultivate joy in just the day-to-day moments of life? I mean, every day we know it's not going to be perfect,
Mhm.
but how can we stay in this place of maybe not just with joy, but also gratitude?
Yeah. So with gratitude, it's one of those things like our muscles when we work out, right? You got to work it out in order to actually see the results. And I think
Hmm.
gratitude is one of those things as well that we think if we said today, "Oh, I'm thankful for today," that it'll carry you for the week.
Yeah.
And that's like saying, "I worked out today." That's going to carry me for the week. It may carry you. I don't know if it's through the week, you know? And
Yeah.
so gratitude is kind of the same thing. Like anything, you've got to practice it in order to actually feel it, in order for it to actually stick, in order to
Hmm.
actually see the results. And so one of those things is every day finding something to be grateful for, right?
Yeah.
Whether it is, I'm just grateful that I got to work on time today because all week I've been running late, or I'm grateful that the traffic was not as bad.
Nah.
So finding something, but practicing that every day, whether it is you jot it down on your phone. I used to keep in my phone a notes list, and I would do a gratitude moment of the day. And
Hmm.
so if you start tracking those, it's easy to see. And then it becomes, kind of this way of life, or maybe
Yeah.
journaling it at the end of the day or when you first get up in the morning. What is something you're grateful for? But I think the more
Hmm.
repetitive you are with your gratitude practice, the more it starts to enlighten your heart, the more that you start to focus on the positive versus the negative. Doesn't mean life is not negative and that negativity is not happening. It just means that you're making this choice of being intentional and more mindful to look at the positive versus the negative. And so I think having this practice of daily gratitude, writing it
Hmm.
down, not just saying it, but somewhere that you can go and look at it, that you can track the gratitude.
Yeah.
Because when you see it, then it kind of opens your heart. It kind of makes you lighthearted. You're like, wow, this week, okay, okay, wow,
Yeah.
just going through it. And it's this change that happens over you, whether you want to or not. Something inside, just even if it's the smallest of like this
Hmm.
little glimmer of joy starts to happen, right? And then I also think when it comes to joy as well, is it's okay. This is one of those moments when you got to go back and glance at maybe the old you, that older
Yeah.
version. And so looking at, as I like to call it, remember when moments. HEN and WIN. Remember your wins. Remember your, when something was going great, when you
Yeah.
were in a joyful state, the win in life that made you feel joyful. When you reflect back on those, whether that's something you write a list down. I have what I call a remember when box, and I put things in there that are significant in my life that bring me joy, whether it was a
Mhm.
concert that I went to, so I had the stub, whether it was a speaking engagement I was invited to that I just loved so much and I had the program. But I opened up the remember when box when those
Yeah.
moments to find joy are a little harder, so that I can go and look back at some quote unquote older joy, right?
Yeah.
So that I can start finding my new joy.
Yeah, I love that. I love that remember when box. That's so nice. I need to do one of those. I've dropped so many gems today. I was sitting here jotting notes. If you stare, you compare. The win versus the win. You've dropped so many pointers, and you also touched on one section that I know, like, man, I could
Mhm.
just spend time on this. But I know we got to wrap it up. We can't talk all that. Would love to. I would love to. And I know people are going to be inboxing me saying, hold on. I want more. Bring her back. Bring her back.
I will
But
gladly
thank
come
you.
back.
Thank you so
Thank
much. And
you.
thank you so much for being here. And just dropping these gems of wisdom on mindful aging and just with us on how to reframe our thoughts around aging, learning to accept that,
Yeah.
how to walk in this new way of life. And child, you dropped so many gems. I was like, I'm gonna have to listen to this and just take notes again. Take notes for myself. So this was
Oh,
amazing. Any last words of wisdom for our guests? And also, how can they connect with you on social media or anywhere else that you may be located?
yeah. So I would say, as far as just some last words of wisdom or thoughts, as I like to say, some
Mhm.
perspectives, because, you take what you need and leave what you
Yeah.
don't. But the biggest thing, as I often tell many clients and friends, and even myself, is please continue to give yourself the grace to grow. Please
Mhm.
understand that it is okay. Whatever emotions that you're navigating, whatever feelings that you're experiencing about aging, it's okay. I guarantee you, you're not the first person to have that thought, to have that
Mhm.
feeling, to experience what you're experiencing, even if it feels like that, you are not. Remember when I said in the beginning of this episode, I sat at that table with my friend and we both pulled that menu back at the same
Yes.
time. Just know that there is somebody else pulling a menu back.
Mhm.
Basically, whatever you're going through, somebody else is too. And so instead of focusing on what it's not, go focus on finding that tribe. If it's a
Yeah.
community that you need to help you navigate this midlife place, find that community, attach yourself to someone or someone's that can help you to feel a little less alone as you venture through this. But understand it's a process and you don't have to love aging, but do love and appreciate yourself. And so hopefully
Yes.
along the way, aging will become something that you're less afraid of and more embracing of. And I think those are kind of my last little thoughts that I leave the listeners. And as far as connecting with me, you can find me on Instagram, and my handle is at Candice Denise, and I'm on TikTok. My handle is by Candice Denise, and you can also find me on YouTube. I am Candice Denise, and I think those are pretty much the places that I'm hanging out right now. Some other things
Okay.
are in the works, but that's where you can connect with me.
Nice, nice. And I'll definitely also post those in the description of the episode so
Thank
you
you.
all can click on the links and it will take you right to her social media pages. Thank you so much again for being here. You have, I know, touched me, and I know when the listeners hear this, they are going to be like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love when I get that type of feedback and they're just begging me to bring somebody back.
Mhm.
So I will definitely keep you posted on the things that I hear. Also,
Too.
you guys, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, I will see you all later.